Not many armored vehicles can surprise you on the battlefield like the 180-ton steel giant known as the Maus German heavy tank. After the Louvre project was completed, development of this tank lasted from March 1942 until June 1944. The crew company planned to create 141 of these tanks, but the regular bombing runs by the British Royal Air Force disrupted this plan. And in 1943, during the Ruhr Pocket operation, the Crewe military plant suffered extremely serious damage. As a result, manufacturing of the Maus was impossible for nearly 8 months. By the time the installation was restored, the order was reduced. Crewe was able to produce 2 tanks and 1 turret instead of 141 planned vehicles. If the British Air Force hadn't bombed the German military plants repeatedly, forcing that work to come to a standstill, there is a possibility that additional Maus tanks could have been adopted for service and used on the battlefields of World War II. However, that didn't happen. In World of Tanks, the Maus is a top-tier vehicle in the German heavy tank branch. We're going to rate the combat characteristics of this vehicle in comparison with other Tier 10 heavy tanks using a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being the lowest and 10 the highest. The movement and mobility characteristics are worse than its tier mates. Hull's reverse speed is 15 degrees per second, while turret reverse speed is 14 degrees per second with a maximum speed of 20 kilometers an hour. The firing characteristics are not the strongest feature of this tank either. Aiming time is 2.9 seconds with the accuracy of the gun rated at 0.38 meters with a distance of 100 meters. The alpha damage is also 490 with the average penetration of an armor-piercing shell at 246 millimeters. But don't let that scare you away from this behemoth. This tank is one of the best armored in the game. The higher glaze is 200 millimeters thick, situated at an angle of 52 degrees, which means it can and will resist shots from the most powerful guns in the game. Also, its side armor is 185 millimeters with a slope angle of 0 degrees, which will decrease its combat effectiveness. The frontal armor of the turret is 240 millimeters with a convex shape, and the side armor of the turret is 210 millimeters, situated at an angle of 30 degrees. This armor can be a hard nut to crack for the majority of tanks. This tank also has 3,000 hit points, which is the best rate in the game. As other heavy tanks of this tier, save for the British, it has a view range of 400 meters. So let's sum all this up. The disadvantages of the Maus are its low acceleration and mediocre fire potential. In addition, its giant silhouette makes the tank an excellent target for artillery. The main advantages of this vehicle are its huge amount of HP and very solid armoring. The weak spots of this tank are the sides of its turret, the lower glaze, and the poor armored parts of its hull that can be penetrated by shooting its tracks at an angle. So let's talk about the battle tactics. The Maus is the vehicle for the front line. It can take a lot of damage and shield allies from enemy fire. Traditionally, city maps are considered to be the ideal place for heavy tanks to fight in. You can either hold position or push the flanks, and the chances of being shot by artillery are extraordinarily low. You should never forget about your weak spots though. Make sure you hide the lower glaze and turn your turret so enemies do not have an opportunity to aim at its sides. It's really important to understand what you're going to do during each stage of battle. You shouldn't run forward during the first few minutes just because you don't see anyone ahead of you. Remember, an enemy can always be waiting around the corner. If you're sure there's only a few tanks ahead of you, gather your teammates and then push forward. Support of your teammates is highly important. If a Maus is left alone, it becomes an easy target for enemies since it cannot fight on 2 fronts. Let's use Runeberg as an example. We're only going to talk about the city parts of this map because we highly recommend you stay away from those open territories. At the start of the battle, you should move to section G3 and use the destroyed building as cover. From there, you can shoot through the embouchure. If enemies are running through the third line or using defensive tactics, you'll be able to inflict damage on them while remaining protected. From this square, you'll be able to take the following steps. If there's a lot of enemy tanks, move to section F2 and shoot them from behind the corner. Push the third line or even move to section J2 if enemies break through the small town. Generally, on every map, you should perform several actions that may provide your team with some advantages over your enemies. The Maus is not able to move fast from one flank to another. That's why you should always predict the flank where you will meet the main enemy force so you can perform your role there. On maps such as Malinovka, Podorovka, El Haluf, Sand River, and Steppes, you won't fulfill the potential of this tank. The Maus is so slow, it's really hard to change position or find cover quickly. Its giant size let enemies scout it quickly, and artillery will shoot as soon as possible. Also, with its mediocre penetration as well as poor accuracy, it makes it impossible for you to shoot enemies at a long distance. On Malinovka, the best decision is to stay near the monastery or the barns. On El Haluf, you can hide behind the mountains. On Sand River, get to the city and try to hide from enemy fire. On Steppes, you may use stones as cover and fire on other heavy tanks from there. Podorovka is one of the most unfavorable maps for the mouse because you can be scouted and destroyed before you even get into position. That's why you should move carefully and use existing buildings in the village for cover. Any other actions will lead to certain death. The effectiveness of this mouse is heavily dependent on the map. There's a significant problem for playing this vehicle. When you're in a valley or other locations where you can hide from artillery, it can really do a lot. But as soon as the mouse appears on an open map or is left alone, it becomes very, very vulnerable. It'd be a surprise if you're successfully able to finish the battle. We should also mention another weak point of the mouse. When you position your tank at an angle, the enemy can shoot your track. A shell will penetrate and hit the armor, which is only 80 millimeters thick. At long range, you should never be afraid. But in close range, remember you should position your tank to increase the chances of a ricochet when the enemy is aiming at you. During a face hug against almost any tank, you should always use your weight to your advantage. While ramming damage is not high, it can always come in handy. To increase efficiency of your tank in battle, you should buy the following equipment: the Tank Gun Rammer, the Gun Stabilizer, and the Enhanced Gun Laying Drive will help your tank in close combat, improve your aim, and help you shoot faster. As for the skills of your crew, the most effective combination is the following. Good luck on the battlefield, soldier.